I ran into my old friend Byron Lovelace, the painter, the other day down at Arco Plaza. Byron's an abstract expressionist, but he makes a precarious living copying old masters. He just sold a painting, another copy of Leonardo's Last Supper, and he was in a jubilant mood. "Come on," he said. "I'm taking you to lunch." Byron's cracked glasses frames are bound together with grimy adhesive tape. He seldom takes a bath. On a hot day, the stink of the man is enough to knock a horse down. We go to La Golondrina, a tourist trap on Alvera Street, which is fine with me, because La Golondrina is the sort of place where you meet the big bouncy blondes from Minnesota who've come to Southern California to get their business fixed. The restaurant is crowded, but we're seated immediately on the whitewashed brick patio. There's a Minnesota blonde at the next table. Byron orders the House Chenin Blanc. After we blurred the edges a little bit, we order the costillas and adobo, and Byron calls for more wine. "The first thing an artist should learn is how to use a gun," he says. The Minnesota blonde is giving me the eye over the rim of her margarita glass, and I'm beginning to feel that maybe life can be beautiful after all. "The first thing an artist should learn is how to use a gun," Byron repeats. "Brother, are you listening? My friend, there are 4 ways for an artist to survive in this world. 1. Be born with a silver spoon in your mouth. 2. Marry a rich girl. 3. Get yourself a nice clean war wound. Okay, and the 4th? Use a gun. Walk into a bank with a piece of iron in your fist and demand the cash." I read an article in the paper this morning. Some desperado held up a bank on La Cienega. Strolled out with 500,000 berries. Think of it. The robber blew a teller away in the process, the paper said. What the fuck? Is that so bad, killing one person? A painter has to eat, doesn't he? Maybe it's right that some little bank teller should die or spend the rest of his life in a fucking wheelchair so that I can do my work without worrying where my next meal is coming from. The Minnesota blonde departs and the costillas and adobo arrive. "Byron, your paintings are selling. Listen to me. You got $200 for this last job." Right. You're absolutely right. That's the 3rd sale this month, in fact. Byron pulls his tattered spiral notebook out of his shirt pocket. He puts on his glasses and thumbs through the greasy pages. "Yeah, here we are. I sold 2 in June, 2 in May, 3 in April. Let's see, that's 16 Last Suppers since March, and 11 Mona Lisas. My total for last year was 27 Last Suppers and 14 Mona Lisas. Not bad, you say, but what does it do for me except keep me alive? It's not my work, don't you understand that? Look beyond your nose. Look beyond your stomach if you can for once in your life. It's all copies of fucking Leonardo. I tell you, brother, it's time to bury Leonardo and Michelangelo and the rest of those shits. Botticelli, Verrocchio, Tintoretto, Caravaggio, Paolo Cello. Fuck those wops. Let them fade gracefully into the chiaroscuro where they belong. Let the dead bury their dead. They've had their day. Now it's our day. It's time, I'm telling you. It's time." I'd been hoping after we'd finished the meal that Byron would order more wine, and then maybe another wave of Minnesota blondes would arrive, and things would start to happen. But instead, Byron glanced at his watch, then abruptly hopped to his feet and excused himself. He was off to trade massages with Derek Delmonico, a young pastel artist who lives in West Hollywood. It's not that Byron is gay, but a woman would be hoping for too much. This morning, Byron dropped by. It had been a month since our lunch at La Golondrina. We took the bus downtown. Byron was excited. He'd just sold another copy of the Mona Lisa, but it turned out that there was something else he wanted to talk to me about. "Guess what?" he began as we were crossing Bonnie Bry Street. "I'm writing a novel. Does that surprise you?" "No, not at all. Why should it? If you can paint, you can write." We go to Clifton's and find an out-of-the-way table. We both get the split-pea soup and the cornbread. Byron is bursting with talk about his book. Whom the Gods Love. That's the title. Do you like it? The hero's name is Marcus Maduke. That's one of the pen names you used when you wrote for Bareback Books, isn't that right? The truth is, I've chosen you as the model for the lead character. He's a middle-aged writer with a suitcase full of rejected novels. Unknown, unpublished, a complete failure. You don't mind my saying that, do you? It all goes back to something we talked about that day at La Golondrina. We were sitting on the patio, remember? The first thing an artist should learn is how to use a gun. Well, that was just a germ, a nucleus. This thing has grown, believe me. My head is seething with ideas. I understand how it is with you guys now, you writers. You get an idea in your head and you go crazy with it. It takes over your life. Ideas are an obsession, a drug. Not a drug that brings you down, a drug that puts you to sleep, but a snort of pure oxygen, a sort of intellectual cocaine. Do you like that phrase, intellectual cocaine? Listen, I've got a million of them. The minute I started jotting down ideas for this book, I felt something click. Let's take, for example, my choice of the name for the lead character, Marcus Maduke. It's perfect, don't you see? And my other characters, Lloyd Massillon, Karen Mulhern, Tessa Tremaine. I'm finding that I have a knack for that, for choosing character names. This facility of mine, and I hope I don't appear too self-congratulatory, is something I find lacking in your work, if you don't mind a shot of criticism from an old friend. For example, your book about Mexico that was never published. What was the title? Tarantula Woman. There was that fat girl, the whore, who was supposedly in love with you. What was her name? Profunda. Ah, yes, Profunda. You know, somehow that didn't ring true. Oh, really, Byron? Well, you see, that was her real name. I didn't bother to change it because I knew she'd never read the book. She couldn't read. She was illiterate. Ah, yes, her real name. I understand now. But it wasn't real. Know what I mean? No. Well, let's get back to the plot. I think you'll find this interesting. Marcus Maduke, we'll call him Mark, has a painter friend, Lloyd Massillon, model, of course, on yours truly. Lloyd counsels Mark. He has a surefire scheme, you see, for getting published. The conversation goes something like this. Listen to me, Mark. The way to publication is fame. The way to fame is crime. Commit a spectacular crime and you become a world figure. Get media exposure and publication is assured. Get your manuscripts in order, buy a gun with a telescopic sight, and grab a plane to Washington, or a taxi to Hollywood. It doesn't matter whether you kill the president, or a princess, or a movie star, as long as it's somebody famous. That's your ticket, Mark. Publication guaranteed. They'll probably make a movie about you, too, like they did with Lee Harvey Oswald and Gary Gilmore and Charlie Manson and the Boston Strangler. The criminal celebrity Carol Chessman wrote his best-selling novel Cell 2455 Death Row while awaiting execution at San Quentin. Did you know that? James Earl Ray, convicted murderer of Martin Luther King, presently pursues a burgeoning literary career from his cell at the Riverbend Penitentiary in Nashville. Mark David Chapman, John Lennon's assassin, signed a book contract shortly after being imprisoned at Attica, and even wrote to Yoko Ono to ask that she participate in the venture. Incidentally, Chapman had with him when he shot Lennon outside the Dakota a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, not a bad book, by the way, a circumstance which reaffirms an association I've been investigating, the close connection, in modern times, between literature and crime, between literature and murder, and, in particular, between literature and assassination. Well, Lloyd Massillon goes on, you see what I'm getting at, Mark, my boy. Put your manuscripts in order, buy yourself a gun, select a famous victim, pull the trigger. You're made. Beautiful, isn't it? I imagine they'll let you go on writing in prison, too, unless you get the chair. Either way, you win. The first thing an artist should learn is how to use a gun. Do you get it now? So, Mark decides to take Lloyd's advice. After all, life is war. He'll blow some celebrity away in order to pull himself up into the spotlight on the coattails of a famous corpse. And so the die is cast. The rest of the plot is rather elementary. Having decided on the course of action, Mark sets about his work with elaborate precision. He packs his 13 rejected novels in a steamer trunk and places the trunk in storage. He drafts a, quote, letter of explanation, unquote, a document that tells quite candidly why he did what he did, and he dispatches the letter to his attorney along with the key to the storage unit where his manuscripts are held. Accompanying the sealed letter of explanation and the key are instructions to his attorney stating that the contents of the sealed envelope are to be released simultaneously to the police and to the press when Mark is arrested or upon notification of his death. Mark's plan, incidentally, is to assassinate the President of the United States. He buys a folding rifle with a telescopic sight, practices at a range, and makes several trips to Washington for dry runs. In the meantime, he begins a diary, the Assassination Diary, documenting his preparations, his thoughts, his misgivings, his resolutions, and so on. Never before has an assassin provided the world at large with so thorough an examination of its motives and of the living, thinking mind behind those motives. The Assassination Diary, Mark realizes, is a human document of the utmost importance. He's filled now with a sense of purpose, a sense of destiny. What was it Napoleon said? "I feel myself driven toward an end that I do not know. As soon as I have reached it, an atom will suffice to shatter me. Till then, not all the forces of mankind can do anything against me." "I know I'm doing all the talking," Byron interrupts himself. "Would you like another bowl of soup? What about some cornbread? I hope I'm not boring you." No. Well, the rest of the plot, as I say, is elementary. After the dry runs and the preparations, comes at last the real thing. Mark flies to Washington for his rendezvous with Destiny. He makes his way to the roof of a building that he has previously reconnoitered, a vantage point from which he'll have a clear shot at the President's caravan when it passes, as he has previously ascertained, at 3 that afternoon. He has with him, in addition to the murder weapon, the Assassination Diary, in which he's madly scribbling. He has made a pact with himself to record his thoughts and actions right up to the decisive moment when he squeezes the trigger, and beyond, until he surrenders himself to the arms of the police. As the hour approaches, however, a seemingly unrelated incident transpires. A prostitute and her pimp have also ascended to the roof and are engaged in a violent altercation. The pimp slaps the woman around. She's sobbing and her face is covered in blood. Mark, outraged, rushes to the conflict and tries to protect the woman, and in the process he's stabbed and fatally wounded. The pimp and the prostitute rush off, leaving Mark to die. The President's caravan passes without incident, and Mark bleeds to death on the concrete. As an ironic footnote, at this very moment, Mark's agent telephones to inform him that one of his novels, The Brass Lollipop, has just been accepted for publication. Well, what do you think of it? I admit that it's based, to some extent, on Dostoevsky's famous novel Crime and Punishment. Why not? Dostoevsky's hero Raskolnikov killed the old pawnbroker Lisaveta to prove that he was a man of action, a Napoleon. But Napoleon doesn't have to prove he's Napoleon, don't you see? Raskolnikov is very much like you and me. He's not a man of action, and he never will be. He's a Hitler without charisma. He's trapped inside the prison of his own mind. He's a failed artist, an angel without wings. In the end, it's Sonia, the holy prostitute, who provides the way to salvation. Inspired by his love for her, Raskolnikov moves out of the arena of the intellect altogether. He enters a new dimension for him, the realm of the spirit. In the same way, my hero, Marcus Maduke, alias you, the failed writer, he has it all planned out, the assassination of the President, but at the last instant, fate intervenes. He follows his heart. He moves to rescue the prostitute, a woman who is altogether unworthy of his attentions. But that doesn't matter, you see. What matters is his action, pure, unselfish, totally extraneous to the program he's set up for himself. And although it costs him his life, there's a sense of fulfillment, because he's come full circle, from alienation to involvement. Well, Donaldo, what do I think? My God, I'm astonished at Byron's description of his novel. Clearly the man's a genius, a Picasso of literature. Why, I've never hatched anything even remotely approaching Whom the Gods Love. But a week went by, and then 2, and I found myself at Clifton's once again, thinking about Byron's novel. A sparkling concept, to be sure, Byron. But will you be able to write it? Haven't I listened to the dreams of an army corps of would-be writers talking out their books in 100 shithole bars? Great expectations, yes, but can you sit down at the typewriter and churn it out? Can you sit there hour after hour until the words are no longer entities in your mind but flames leaping from your fingertips? As if in answer to my question, in walked Byron, and he was flying high. He'd just sold a copy of Van Gogh's Starry Night. And the novel? Whom the Gods Love? What about the novel? How's the writing going? He mumbled something about needing to do some more research and quickly changed the subject. Then he took his grubby spiral notebook out of his shirt pocket and began thumbing through the pages. Check it out, bro. That's the third Starry Night this month. And listen to this, Donaldo. My total sales for the year so far are 12 Starry Nights, 15 Mona Lisas, and 14 Last Suppers.